Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and in this episode I spoke with comedian Gabriel Featherstone. We talk about his preparations for his upcoming Fringe show, Robocop versus the Terminator versus Gabriel Featherstone, including the benefits and downsides of the free Fringe versus ticketed shows. We also talk about how he considers comedy an emotional anaesthetic, working with previous podcast guests Hot Death Theatre, the legal ramifications of impersonating Tinky Winky, and lots more.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Featherstone. I'm a stand-up comedian, an alternative comedian from Glasgow. I've been doing comedy since 2015. I've been consistently good at it since around 2021. I've done a number of shows at Fringes, mostly in the UK, one in Iceland. I do a lot of different types of things. I do comedy music. I do a lot of kind of prop-based comedy. The most popular thing I've ever done is probably a tweet about the Teletubby Tinky Winky's bizarre sex life that went viral in 2021, which I see regularly on TikTok and things like that, getting millions and millions of views and likes when posted by people other than me.
Yeah, we've had another guest, Noreen Skinner. She was on Britain's Got Talent, and so there's a piece of her performance, but every now and again, yes, it will appear on some random Twitter or Instagram engagement farm account, and we'll get 250,000 likes and whatever, and you kind of think, well, you just totally stolen that.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's the most popular thing I've ever done. No one knows that weird Tinky Winky is me outside of my friends and family, but it's taken on a life outside of my world. And also what's difficult about that is that Twitter account was very popular for a week in October of 2021. But before I could really leverage that into anything, I got banned from Twitter for misrepresenting a public figure. Not for copyright, for their argument was that people would think I was the real Tinky Winky, and the things I was saying were making the real Tinky Winky look bad. Because I was saying he was living in a sewer and eating worms. The popular tweet I did was there was a sex journalist said something about why are all sex toys purple, and I said in character as Tinky Winky, sex toys are purple because people, the manufacturers want people to associate them with me, Tinky Winky, a living manifestation of pure lust. And Twitter was I think worried about getting sued by Tinky Winky's lawyers, and my argument was Tinky Winky has no lawyers, he has nothing, he doesn't exist. And that fell on deaf ears, and I got banned. And then by the time I managed to persuade them that they weren't in danger of being sued by Tinky Winky, purple space baby who doesn't exist, no one was really interested anymore. So I lost the momentum. But other people were able to pick up the ball that Twitter had slapped out of my hands and ran with it, and got they got lots of hits and likes and things. Good for them, I reckon.
Yeah. I mean, is that the kind of thing that it just happens once and that's it, or do you then spend forever trying to recreate that going viral and drive yourself crazy?
Yeah, I think I did. I've tried a couple of times to replicate, because what I did to get a viral thing was that I, responded to something that was already popular with something eye-catching, and that led to a lot of engagement and shares or whatever. So I've tried to do the same thing ever since with other things I've made, and but yeah, nothing's had the same amount of success. I have a really good song about how living is pointless in a world where Shrek 5 doesn't exist, and that's been successful in other ways. When I do it, at gigs, people like it. And it was a support feature for an animated remake of an episode of Frasier that I contributed to in the US. So it got a little cinema release as this, before the main feature thing in cinemas all over the US. But I've tried to put that in the comments of popular posts about Shrek related things on Reddit and Twitter. And no one's interested in it, even though it's really, really amazing, and I'm a genius who should be recognised. So that is frustrating. It's also weird as well, having something of yours. I go through kind of phases of not gigging much. I have months where I'm gigging really constantly, and then 2 or 3 months where I have 4 or 5 gigs, and during that period I get a little bit sad and feel like, oh, I'm on the outside looking in the comedy universe. And it's weird being in that mindset and then looking at a video of like something you made going really, really well to a packed cinema full of people in Los Angeles. But I wasn't there. It feels like that didn't happen. I just see it through my laptop screen. So that's quite bizarre. I feel like I've strayed quite far from the question you asked, which I no longer remember.
Well, do you try and chase that high?
Yes, I have. But it was nice having a music video on a big cinema screen in Los Angeles, and the people in Los Angeles said, "Yeah, that's good." That was fun. But I've never managed to replicate. I have tried to replicate the success of the Tinky Winky sex toy tweet, which will be carved into my tombstone one day. I've not managed to make anything take off to the same extent. And people, outside of my social life don't know that fucked up Tinky Winky is me.
Excellent. So yes, recording this end of March. So you just had the Glasgow Comedy Festival. I know you had 2 shows there. I mean, how did it all go?
Went really well. So the 2 shows I had had a show called Curse of the Black Seal, which is a double act show. It's me and a burlesque dancer, nightclub singer called Seaglass Beach. And it's sort of a combination like burlesque comedy musical show about a magic seal. It's like you remember the concept of a selkie? Yeah, it's like a sort of Celtic seal woman who she's a seal and then she comes on land and peels off her skin and she's a woman underneath. So it's a kind of a comedy, burlesque, occult themed show about a selkie cursing a bloodline. And it's got lots of little sketches and skits and funny little songs and kind of burlesque elements and a little stand-up comedy section. So that went really well. And the other show I did was called Robocop versus the Terminator versus Gabriel Featherstone, which was sort of the first half of it was just the framing device of it is like the audience are kind of philosophers and politicians visiting an art gallery in space in the year 3929, and an insane artist stroke genetic engineer has cloned me back to life as a sort of curiosity, because in the fiction of the show, I'm the only stand-up comedian who survived the nuclear apocalypse from the Terminator movies. So he's brought me back to life to talk about being the last stand-up comedian. And so the first half of the show is like the normal comedy that I do in 2025, the stuff that I've honed for years. And then the second half was kind of stuff written from the perspective of the last comedian doing stand-up comedy in a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by killer robots. So it's sort of a mixture of concepts, and that went very well. And I was worried about it because I'd written most of the post-apocalypse stuff the day of the show, so I was worried it wasn't going to be spectacular. But then people really, really liked it, so that's nice. It's nice when you pull a rabbit out of a hat at the last minute. I really felt like I was, the bit in Wallace and Gromit where Gromit's on the train and he's laying the track as the train is going. That really felt like the creative process for that, and I was worried that was going to end in disaster. And then it didn't, which is nice.
So, you're saying, you're kind of more on the alternative side as opposed to kind of traditional stand-up. And we had Hot Death Theatre on recently. Do you find that it's almost a different scene, or do that and the kind of more traditional stand-up, do they kind of bleed into each other and there is a lot of crossover?
I'd say both statements are true. So there is kind of, there are a lot of very good kind of alt comics on the Scottish scene. So like Hot Death Theatre are amazing. There's also people like Ruth Hunter and Sandy Buttel and Amelia Baylor and Donnie Vostok, who do very kind of weird out there things, and lots of new kind of alt comedians like Maddie Fernando and Kit Campbell. But there isn't a lot of outlets for just strict alternative comedy. Like a lot of the alt things have kind of wrapped up recently. So there was a show at the Monkey Barrel called The Other Show for a while, and like the Monkey Barrel had like lots of different alternative comedy shows over the years, like alternative comedy showcases, but they don't really have an equivalent at the moment. There was a really good show in Glasgow called Chunks, where the premise was that you could do whatever comedy you wanted so long as it wasn't stand-up and was 3 minutes long, so people would do like animations and interpretive dance and all sorts of character-based weirdness. My favourite thing that ever happened at Chunks was a man came to Chunks in a television quality Mr. Blobby costume and sat in the audience for the entire show on like the hottest day in June, and then didn't do a set and then left, and no one knows who that Mr. Blobby was. Perhaps it was the real Mr. Blobby. So shows like that, shiitake nights, but kind of at the moment there's not a lot of alternative comedy shows that are just for alternative comedy. I think there's one starting called Nash that looks quite good, that me and Hot Death Theatre are doing soon. And me and Hot Death Theatre and Ruth Hunter and Elaine Malcolmson ran an alt comedy show for a while called Fever Dream. And we're doing a show in Reykjavik soon, but we've not got anything like planned in Glasgow at the moment because it's hard, because a core tenet of that is we want it to be in an accessible venue, and that's kind of hard to find in Glasgow. So yeah, so because of like currently kind of a lack of purpose-built showcases for alternative comedy, I think that might change in the future, because that goes through like waves of there not being a lot for alternative comedy and then there being a lot for alternative comedy. So I don't think that's a permanent situation. But right now, I think you'll see a lot of alt comics on bills with more kind of mainstream comics, because that's where there is to perform. And also I think that's always true, even when there are alternative comedy spaces to perform. Because I think like I like alternative comedy shows a lot. They're my favourite ones. But I think there's also something very satisfying about doing like weird comedy in a space where it's not expected. Because like comedy is about surprise, like a punchline is is an engineered surprise. And if you're doing something kind of unconventional in a stand-up environment, if you've got puppets, if you've got weird masks, if you're playing a goblin from the sewer or whatever, and everyone else is talking about their regular relatable lives, that surprise is quite powerful. So it's quite fun contrasting with the rest of the bill being kind of stylistically different. That's the pro of doing alt comedy on a sort of more mainstream night, is it feels kind of like it could potentially go wrong if people aren't in the mood for that kind of thing. It could also go very, very well. Like you often get, like alt comics are very celebrated on kind of more mainstream nights by audiences, because they're like, oh wow, that was very different, and it sticks in their heads. And then obviously the benefit of doing like an alt comedy show is like the people come usually to see that kind of comedy, so there's enthusiasm, so it feels less risky. I think you do get a little bit of an element of, not universally, but sometimes you get an element of bookers who are a little bit wary of alternative comedy, because I think they have it in their minds that it can massively go either way. It's a bit of a riskier prospect sometimes. Like I remember like ages ago being told by Booker that like they really liked me and they really liked my act, and the quality of it was like good enough, and like the audience response was good enough that they would have moved me up to paid gigs, but they thought I was too weird to do that. They thought it was a risky prospect. And I remember being annoyed by that, kind of thinking, well, I did well, so it shouldn't matter. Like, your only thought should be like, is it, effective or not, rather than having anxieties about, will weird stuff turn people off? Because it's demonstrably, worked.
When you're doing kind of, in a more traditional environment, and, what's the kind of success ratio you need for it to kind of work? So, if 25% of people think this is incredible, and the other, 50% think, I'm not sure about this, and, another 20% go, this isn't for me. How much do you need to kind of bring the whole room with you?
It depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you're wanting to, like, if your aim is to be, like, rebooked or moved on to, like, bigger spots or bigger, better, well-paid spots, you really need the whole room. But that isn't always the aim with alternative comedy. Like, you get people who are trying to do something else. Like, you get, like, your Andy Kaufman type figures who are actively trying to kind of frustrate the audience and get kind of different kinds of reactions out of the audience than laughter and enjoyment. And you also get comedians that do sort of thrive on a gig that hasn't gone very well. So, yeah, like with the more mainstream comedians, they are typically going for conventional success, which makes sense. A lot of them are sort of more career orientated than alternative comedy people are. That's not universally true, and like obviously alternative comedy people care about their careers and progression as well. But yeah, sometimes with alt comedy, making everybody laugh isn't the mission, and people have a sort of that people kind of enjoy, having a minority in the room enjoying what they're doing a lot. There's a line from a musical called Title of Show, which is a musical about the making of itself. And one of the songs is called, I'd rather be 9 people's favourite thing than 100 people's 9th favourite thing. And I think there is like kind of a few people who wear that as a badge of honor, being like, they're not universally successful, but they have a very enthusiastic fan base. I think I'm like that a little bit. I do have like a little bit of a following who could all come together to the gig in the same medium-sized car. But they're very enthusiastic and nice. So yeah, I like them. However, I would also like to be the biggest comedian in the world and be doing all, and be starring in all the Marvel movies and have £1 million because of my incredibly successful comedy career. But yeah, I think like I sort of like enjoy, I kind of enjoy splitting a room, but I enjoy unanimously winning everybody over a lot more. I think I'm kind of yeah, I've got a mixture of, I'll take having an enthusiastic, small group of people in the room really enjoying it as a win, but I do massively prefer it if everyone in the room is ecstatically happy about what I've done.
And so you mentioned Reykjavik, and you mentioned that about people out there called Ricky Freaks.
Yeah.
And so there's like a real scene out there. I mean, how different is that to, the Glasgow Comedy Festival, for example?
Yeah, Reykjavik's quite different to the Glasgow Comedy Festival. It feels a little bit like it's a bit smaller, and you have more interaction with the people who are in charge. Like I very rarely see the people who are in charge of the Glasgow Comedy Festival, which sort of makes sense because they are doing a lot. They've got a lot of responsibilities, and they're doing stuff all over the town. You kind of see the people in the Reykjavik Fringe more often who are in charge. You see them more at gigs. Because it's a little bit of a smaller festival, although they also have a lot to do and are very, very busy. And one thing I think is very good about the Reykjavik Fringe, I've not seen in other Fringe festivals, is they do like a night on the beginning of the Fringe where there's a cinema called Shana Bio, and they get like as many people as possible to come and pitch their shows in little 3-minute sets, and like lots of people come out and watch that. It's a very good way to sell the show. And Glasgow Comedy Festival doesn't really have an equivalent, and I think that they have like galas and things, but it's kind of established acts that are on those galas, whereas the Reykjavik Fringe, preview night is quite democratic, and just anyone who's doing it can come and perform. And yeah, they do have like, so when I'm in Reykjavik, I've not actually seen very many of the local comedians. There are a few who I really like. There's Friedrich Hallerson is very good, and there's Lavisa Laura and like a few others, but I've not seen much of the local alt scene apart from like the people I've just mentioned. And there's Andrew Sim, who runs the Reykjavik Fringe. He's a nice lad from Aberdeen. So yeah, it's like, so I've actually not been to Reykjavik. So we're doing a sort of Fever Dream. So Fever Dream is the alt comedy night and collective that me and a few other comedians, Hot Death Theatre involved, ran in Glasgow, and we're going over to do I think it's a co-collaboration with Reykjavik's, where it's an alt comedy show where like the comedians all exist on different levels of hell. And like, so like I'm on the level of hell that's reserved for, I think we found out that according to Dante's Inferno, bad writers go to the same level of hell as people who've done violent crimes. So I'm doing like a comedy bit about like a guy who's written terrible erotic fan fiction about Winnie the Pooh having to live his life with all the worst murderers from history. So yes, I'm looking forward to sort of experiencing more of the alt scene. The Reykjavik Fringe has a lot of alt performers, and I'd like to say maybe a bigger alt presence in the Glasgow Comedy Festival, but then I thought about it for a second and realised that's maybe not true. There is a big alt presence at the Glasgow Comedy Festival, but it's a lot of people who've come like from overseas. It's people like John Robertson in his dark room and Elf Lyons doing her really cool clown shows. So I'm excited about kind of seeing more of the local scene, because like when I'm there, I see a lot of people, apart from my friends who live in Reykjavik, I tend to see a lot of people who've come from somewhere else.
Going back to Glasgow, I mean, how did you find, it's kind of partly the aim of the podcast is about kind of promotion and marketing and getting seen in it. How did you find promoting the show and kind of getting people in?
So I had a kind of a unique experience because I was doing 2 shows. And one of them sold extremely well quite quickly, and the other one was more of a struggle to get tickets for. So I think like the show that I was doing with Seaglass Beach sold quite well because of the burlesque element. So I think that drew in a lot of people, and also Seaglass has a lot of very, very committed fans. So that show that I was doing with Seaglass, I think like I'd sold 30 tickets a few days before. Like, in the whole span of the tickets being available, I'd sold like 30 tickets nearly filled the room. The other show, the Robocop Terminator show, I'd sold maybe 10 tickets a few days before the show, but then got a lot of people on the night, so that the audience sizes did end up being comparable. But the double act show with a woman taking her clothes off in it did make a lot more money in advance and sell a lot more tickets. Yeah, so Seaglass is very, very popular, and you could tell who the real draw was. So like that show was very easy to sell because of like Seaglass's popularity and the appetite for burlesque and cabaret stuff. The Robocop Terminator one was a little bit harder to sell because the reason it's called Robocop versus the Terminator is because I'm aware that my name like isn't an enormous draw. Like people in comedy know who I am. People outside of comedy don't necessarily know who I am. So I added Robocop and the Terminator to the title to lure people in with recognised IP, and then thought about how I would incorporate them into the show later. I didn't really have anything to say about Robocop or the Terminator, started writing the show, and don't have a lot to say about them really now, but I have incorporated them in a satisfying way. So the ways I tried to promote the show were like cynically luring people in with recognisable IP. I printed some posters and put those up around the place. Going through a little bit of I work as a... Oh, sorry. So that was an alarm for cooking breakfast that I set yesterday.
Is it burnt by now?
Yeah, it's ruined. Yeah, no, I can't remember what I was talking about. It was posters. So like I work as a tour guide outside of comedy, which is very, very seasonal. So like during the summer, I have a lot of money. During the winter, my savings deplete because no one wants to come to Glasgow or the Scottish Highlands during the winter. So I've gone through a bit of an epoch of poverty recently, a small one. So I didn't have money for things like, targeted ads on social media, which are a thing that work really well. But I didn't have access to that, so I had to kind of come up with other ways to promote the show. I got in touch with Trash Cinema, who are a local kind of cult cinema night in Glasgow that are very good, that show kind of obscure movies. They showed a movie called Turbo Kid recently, which is a delightful coming-of-age story set in a Mad Max future where a man gets his guts ripped out by a bicycle. And they show things like Tammy and the T-Rex, where a man gets his brain put in a T-Rex's body and it affects his relationship in different ways. So they do kind of fun, delightful trash. And I thought, the sort of people who go to that might like a show about... Because I was pitching it as a show about me fighting Robocop and the Terminator. And that does happen at the end. I fight two sort of Sooty and Sweep style sock puppets of Robocop and the Terminator. But most of the show is more about being a post-apocalyptic comedian or me just doing my normal comedy. So I thought comedy about fighting Robocop and the Terminator would appeal to trash movie fans, so I got an advert in their newsletter. But I think that drew some people in. I don't know how effective posters are. I need to do some kind of poll whenever people come to my shows of like, how did you find out about this and see what the most effective means are. I think like targeted ads on social media are the most effective thing to do. But without that in my arsenal, I think I did struggle a little bit selling the Robocop Terminator shows. Also, like doing other gigs before, in the run up to the show is good to promote yourself. Like I think generally when I've sold really well at the past at the Glasgow Comedy Festival, it's been because I've just been at the stand or somewhere and done really well at the stand, and people have come to see me off the back of my stand appearance. But I didn't really have heaps of gigs in the comedy festival before this, because doing tour guiding, I sometimes that takes up a lot of my time, and I forget to kind of book things in. So like when I've had this kind of fallow period of tour guiding, I've booked in loads of gigs for later in the year. So like my May onwards is very busy, but my work kind of kept me from booking things in this little chunk of the year. So I didn't have a lot of opportunities for promo, but I think like that's probably the most effective thing I've done, is like just doing well at other gigs, and that lures people in.
And obviously you've got the challenge ahead of the Edinburgh Fringe, so you're down to do a week kind of in the middle of the Fringe. I mean, was a week the kind of balance between the time it takes and the cost and everything else?
Yeah.
Or did you think, a week's enough anyway?
So the week, it's sort of because it's mainly for financial reasons. I'd really like to do the whole Fringe. This is my first time doing a solo show at the Fringe. I've done like two-hander shows before for the Free Fringe. But so in 2022, I did a two-hander show called Laughter O'Clock, where I split the bill with a different comedian. So for the first 2 days, I did it with Ruth Hunter, then for 2 weeks with Roisin Kenny, and then for 1 week with Eddie McKenzie, who later found fame playing Piglet in the film Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, plays an evil version of Piglet who loves to murder. And so that was only really possible because I did it with the Free Fringe, and I have a friend whose dad is a millionaire who let me stay in his flat. He has like a flat that his dad rents out to students during the year, and lets comedians have for free out of the goodness of his heart during the Fringe. Or at least that used to be the case. But in the year that I did the free Fringe, someone flushed a box of cigarettes down the toilet and caused a flood. And so that flat hasn't been made available to comedians ever since. So that resource is off the table. So I was only really able to do the Fringe in 2022 by doing the free Fringe and like knowing someone who was related to a millionaire who could give me a flat for free. And that is off the table now, and that's not a resource that's available to everybody. So this time round, I'm paying like 1,200 quid for just a tonic room. So like I've had to like save up a lot of money for my tourism job to put into that. And I just didn't have the money to do a full run. I would love to have done a full run, but just like it was 1,200 quid to do a week. And so would have been like 4 times that to do the whole month, and I wouldn't have been able to save up that much money. And like I think the free Fringe is a really, really good thing that sort of mitigates the costs a little bit, because you don't have to pay for the room with the free Fringe. I think it's a very, very good concept. But one issue with the free Fringe is that it's a bit of a lucky dip when it comes to the venues. So you might get, a really, really good venue like the Banshee Labyrinth. My friend Ruth Hunter does a show at the Banshee Labyrinth, Edinburgh's most haunted pub, every year in their very good cinema room. But you might get, like I know a comedian, Alexander Richmond, I think his name is. He's a very good character comedian from Australia. And he came all the way from Melbourne in 2022 to do an hour-long show with the Free Fringe. And he got a temporary balsa wood cube with no roof on it in the staff-only section of the Omni Centre, which is a big shopping centre in Edinburgh, at 2 a.m. to do his show. And it was next to another roofless balsa wood cube that sometimes had death metal in it and sometimes had wrestling. And so he would be doing like quite, complex, soft-spoken character comedy next to another room where people were screaming, or next to another cube where people were screaming, and he'd come all the way from Melbourne to do that. And you get like other rooms, like the room that I had was like the main room of a pub with a curtain separating it from the rest of the pub. And it was workable on days when sport wasn't on and when stag parties weren't in. But when sport was on and stag parties were in, it was too loud to hear the comedian at all. I think it's worth doing the free Fringe, but I really wanted to just have some control over what kind of room I had. Have a good room and not have the anxiety of the lucky dip. I think it has gotten, harder to put a show on at the Fringe. Like I know a lot of older comedians who remember it being, more accessible and more democratic, and now it is really a ravenous money hole. I think it's been that for a while, but it's become more of a ravenous money hole as time has gone by. And it's interesting seeing the Edinburgh Fringe in comparison to other Fringes that I've been to. Because I've done like the Brighton Fringe and the Leicester Comedy Festival and the Reykjavik Fringe. And for Reykjavik and Brighton and for the Glasgow Comedy Festival, a lot of people don't really know that there is a Fringe or a comedy festival in the city. You mention to tourists or to locals that you're doing a Fringe in Reykjavik, and they go, "There's a Fringe here? That's amazing." And I think that you could argue that's a failure of advertising, but you could also argue that makes it more exciting, because it feels more genuinely underground and like a discovery when you find out about it. Whereas the Edinburgh Fringe, people get fed up with it very quickly because it's such a big behemoth and it takes over the city, and like the locals get very upset about it, making their commutes harder. There's more of a sense of tension and anxiety to the Edinburgh Fringe. Like from locals like who aren't involved with the Fringe, they get anxious about it and stressed about it, kind of being an encumbrance in their lives. Tourists find it stressful, especially if they, have come not expecting more than you'd expect. American tourists show up to Edinburgh and the Fringe, don't know the Fringe is on, and get very upset by the Fringe kind of taking over the whole the whole city, and it kind of alienates them. And then you also get like obviously the comedians are having a stressful time because the Edinburgh Fringe, is such a big thing in particularly the UK comedian psyche. It's where you go to prove yourself, and be offered a seat at the table if you do well. So people are, I think Chris MacArthur Boyd described it as like a referendum on your self-worth. So like, I don't think I've heard him say that. I think I've read a social media post where he said that, and I think that's...
Yeah, it was on Here Comes the Guillotine. They had a little mini episode where someone was asking, how do I kind of make a business effectively of my art? And they were kind of saying, well, you shouldn't really, should be art for art's sake and all that kind of stuff. But obviously all all three of them, like I mentioned before, have made, for want of a better phrase, a business of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there is always this balance of kind of, you don't want to bastardize the art by making it too commercial, but the ability to kind of make a living out of your art must be, incredible.
Yeah, it's so good. The year that I did the two-hander show at the Fringe, I sort of had a taste of that. Where like, so my accommodation was free. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, but every day from my show, I would make enough money for breakfast and dinner. And for lunch, I would always have a slice of pizza from the Tony Macaroni's food truck on Hunter Square, because I had a sponsorship deal with them where I have a bit in my show that involves a puppet of Jesus Christ made out of a pizza box. And Tony Macaroni said if I used a Tony Macaroni branded pizza box for my Christ puppet, they would give me free pizza for the full duration of the Fringe. So I did have this nice like month of like doing comedy every day like it was my real job and surviving off of just comedy and really enjoying it. And I think that is the dream, to be kind of exclusively surviving on your art. But it's difficult to get to that place because like there's a lot of like like Simon Munnery, who's like godfather of alternative comedy. I remember hearing recently that he like works as a janitor in a chicken factory. So like in some there's even like people who are like, and even like locally, people who are like very, very big comedians, very successful comedians on kind of the local scenes often have day jobs. I know a few people who've like been on telly who do also have like bar shifts and stuff. So it is like, yeah, it does seem like sometimes a lofty, unattainable goal to be able to just make money, just doing your art. But also I do know people who've done it and they give me hope.
So as well as the Fringe, do you have like a lot of work in progresses planned or other festivals in kind of the build up? And from now till August, does everything you do kind of zone in on that week in August? It's all about getting match fit, as it were.
Yes, I think so. Because as I said, this is my first time doing like I've been doing the Edinburgh Fringe like almost since I started doing comedy. But it's normally like I'll do loads of gigs, and I did a two-hander show one year. So this is my first time doing a solo show, so it's like it's my debut. So I want it to be as good as possible. So I am doing a few other festivals. Like I'm on in Brighton doing the Robocop Terminator show. And I'm going to go to Reykjavik. I'm doing a lot of I'm doing like a Fringe showcase thing in London at some point. Yes, like I've got lots of gigs booked in between now and then, and a lot of it is trying to make it as honed as possible for the Fringe. That is the mission that's on my mind. But also I'm just I'm doing it's like from kind of middle of April until July, I've got loads and loads of gigs. It's partially just because I like comedy's the thing that makes me the happiest. Like I had a really good, like in 2019 I did like my first solo show that wasn't terrible, and the audience really liked it. And then shortly after the show, a girl I really liked told me that she got the impression that I had a crush on her, but she already had a boyfriend, and I did not mind at all because I was riding this amazing wave of good comedy. I've been like dumped immediately after really good gigs, and it's not really put a dent in me. I've been told like that that family members of mine have died, and I've not felt the grief properly until the elation wears off like a day later. It's a very good kind of emotional anaesthetic is the success that goes with stand-up comedy. So I encourage people to do stand-up comedy, achieve a level of proficiency at it, because when it goes really well, it is like the everything medicine. I think if you blew off my legs with a cannon after a really good gig, I would be like, well, this is a nuisance, but this day is still a good day for me. So I'm doing loads of gigs. Like I think my motivation for doing comedy is like, I don't have so much of a long-term plan of like, I want to be on Taskmaster in 5 years or whatever. I want to be a big telly comedian. I would like these things. I would like to be able to sustain myself doing comedy. But it's more because I really like doing comedy. Like if I never became more successful than I am now, I would never stop doing comedy. And you meet a lot of people who are very much in it for the success and like stop after a couple of years if they've not made any progression. If I never get more successful than I am now, I wouldn't stop because just doing comedy makes me feel so good. So I think, if I'm being honest, my primary motivation for doing loads of gigs has more to do with, and I apologize, it contradicts what I just said, but it's more to do with just I'm addicted to doing comedy and doing well at it. So I want loads of opportunities to do that. And that's driving wanting to do well at the Fringe, because if I do well at the Fringe and get good reviews and things, that increases my opportunity to do the thing that I'm addicted to, that fixes all of my problems temporarily. Um, so that's it. I'm a hopeless addict, and that's what's driving me to try and succeed in comedy. But if I don't succeed, I won't stop, because it's got its claws in me.
One other question as well is kind of like Instagram videos and stuff like that. Are you looking to do clips and try and get message out on those kind of things? Because obviously it's kind of harder. I mean, I was talking to Hot Death. They were kind of saying it's harder to kind of sum it up in a 90-second video.
I think I have that problem maybe less than Hot Death Theatre do. I don't not have that problem. But I also I do a lot of kind of short, kind of, one of my big inspirations is Emo Phillips. So I do have a lot of quite just short little one-liner things that are easy to make into clips. And I have also like songs that can make into music videos. I think there is stuff that Hot Death Theatre could share that they haven't shared that would be very good for luring people towards them. But I do take on board that, so their most recent show, Power Suit, is incredible. Like it's such an amazing layered narrative. It's a combination of like rap and animation and mime and like 3 different types of horror, and it's sincerely terrifying at the end and really funny throughout. And they give out these sweets to the audience that are like integral to the plot of the show. Like you're almost playing a character in the show if you're an audience member at Parasuit, and your fate depends on whether or not you eat the ominous sweets they've given you. They've made a show that is partially edible. So they're like, there's a lot of complexity to their shows, and I think that does make it hard to promote and describe. Like they said something like this on there. I listened to the Hot Death one. They said something like that on. I think I have that problem less because I'm just about to repeat myself. Yeah, I've got lots of small jokes, but like Hot Death Theatre have a really good cartoon about a marmot and a beaver. And like the marmot is like actually, I don't want to say anything else about that because I don't want to spoil it for their show. But I think if I already feel like Lawrence will be angry at me for saying marmot and beaver, giving that much away. But they have an amazing cartoon about a marmot and a beaver that I think should go on social media, because I think that would make them. I think Hot Death Theatre should be, in a just world, should be the most popular thing in entertainment. I think it should be more popular than Marvel, because they work so hard and their ideas are so good and so well realised. And I think the first step to making that happen is they should release their amazing Marmot and Beaver cartoon.
Many thanks to Gabriel for taking part. You can find more details in the show notes about where to find him, both online and upcoming shows, including at the Edinburgh Fringe. Thanks for listening.